All right, looks like people are joining.
Yeah, give it a few minutes. So trickling in here.
And we have started recording, so this will be available on our website following when we complete it. So people have asked about that.
Give it another minute. All right. What do you say, Mark?
Yep, it's 11:32. I say we start.
All right. You want to kick us off here?
Sure. Welcome everybody. We are we're starting the everything your association needs to know about CTA filing. A couple housekeeping things. I just announced that we are recording. Recording will be on our website. Also, to ask questions, please use the Q&A button below. We're probably not going to take questions as we go, but we'll address those following the slides. And Matt, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so as Mark said, just you can certainly type your Q&As or your questions as we go, but we're going to hold answering to them to the end, and we will get to them. So let me pull up our little PowerPoint presentation here. Bear with me for a second. Screen two. All right, you can see that, Mark?
Perfect.
All right, so as Mark said, it's everything your association needs to know about CTA filing and probably some stuff you don't need to know as well. So what is this? Where did it come from? Some of the basics here. This was an act passed by Congress in 2021, and it was really designed to sort of prevent, money laundering, financing of terrorists and other sort of illegal activities, particularly financial activities. And I heard a good analogy the other day on another webinar I was attending on this topic. And they really described it almost like as one of those little Russian nesting dolls. And the government is trying to get to the tiny little doll in the middle to find out, who is the money behind the entities, so to speak. And it's implemented by the United States Treasury Department. So this is the whole country. This is not Massachusetts specific, and specifically by the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, better known as FinCEN, which we may refer to throughout this presentation. And really, the main question I'm sure you have is, what is a reporting company, meaning who has to report, and what is the beneficial owner of that? Who are they constituted to be? And to break it down to its most basic level, a reporting company is any entity that files with the Secretary of State's office or similar office. So by any entity, it's, the obvious ones, an LLC, a corporation, a limited partnership, personal corporations, anything like that, we know here in Massachusetts and most other states, those entities are created when you file your articles of organization with the Secretary of State's office here in Massachusetts. So those would definitely be, reporting companies. Then the big question is, well, what about condominiums? They don't file with creating, any filing with the Secretary of State's office, or at least most don't. There are some incorporated associations. And what's really sort of been tripping us up is the language I said a second ago, is that it's any entity that is created or filed with the Secretary of State's office or a similar office. And the FinCEN, unfortunately, doesn't define what or a similar office means. So to be, very, conservative here in terms of making sure that you don't miss the filing when you might have to, there's some folks who believe that, perhaps the creation of the condominium by filing the documents with the registry of deeds would constitute a or similar office, and therefore a condominium might be a reporting company. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is, well, assuming that condominiums are reporting companies, what do you need to file and all that information. Again, most condominiums, if you're a condominium trust or an unincorporated association, you are not created by filing at the Secretary of State, but there's some that say that perhaps this does apply to you, but we'll talk about whether or not that may be the case soon, where there are some court cases that we'll talk about shortly about that issue.
And Matt, just to jump in, sorry to
Yep.
interrupt you, but just to jump in, and it's interesting because it actually, when they talk about filing, they're actually talking about the creation of the entity. And as Matt was saying, a condominium trust or even an unincorporated association is not created by filing with the Secretary of State. For a declaration of trust, it's created by signing the actual declaration, but then those documents go to the Registry of Deeds, and that's caused somewhat of confusion and
Yeah.
uncertainty.
So again, so the entity itself, again, whether it's an LLC corporation, obviously today we're talking mostly about, condominium association, homeowners associations. So the entity itself would be the reporting company that needs to file. And then the other aspect of it is what is the beneficial ownership information? Who are those folks? Under the guidelines issued by FinCEN, a beneficial owner is anyone who exercises substantial control over the entity, over the reporting company. And so it can be directly or indirectly. So the logical interpretation has been that board members of condominiums and HOAs, obviously they do exercise substantial control, and therefore they would be considered a beneficial owner and would have to report. In addition, it is anyone who owns 25% or more ownership interest in a condominium. So let's say you happen to have a 100-unit condominium, just for easy math, and one owner or entity owns 25 or more percent of the owners of the units in there, really based upon probably upon beneficial ownership. They would have to report. So just something to keep in mind, particularly when it comes to developers, when they're first building out, they probably do own most of the units, certainly own more than 25%. If you have sort of volunteer committees, maybe you have a finance committee, a landscaping committee, these are not elected board members. Oftentimes they don't really make decisions. They're just really advisory committees. Those folks likely would not have to report because they're not, again, exercising substantial control. They're really just advisory. All right, Mark, you want to take
Sure.
this?
Thanks, Matt. Um, I'm going to talk a few minutes about the filing requirements, and then I'm going to actually try to walk through a mock filing, on our website through our portal. So under the CTA requirements, there's one report, and it needs to be filed. It has really two pieces of information. First is information about the reporting company, which in this case will be a condo association or HOA association, and then the information about the beneficial owners, which again, in the condo world, HOA world, those are going to be the board members. As Matt mentioned, the beneficial owners are the individuals that essentially exercise substantial control over the association and or own 25% or more of the interest. So if the association is an existing reporting company, which means it was created after January 1, 2024, the association is going to want to select, and I'll show you this on the portal, initial report. So you're filing for the first time. For newly created associations, and those are created after January 1, 2024, there's an additional requirement, and they ask information about the term company applicant. The company applicant is the person who actually completed the work to form the entity. So if we were talking about a corporation, it could be the attorney who filed the articles of organization with the Secretary of State. This information is not required, though, for an existing association. And you'll see when we jump to our portal We have our default set as being checked to be an existing association, because honestly, I would say, 98, 99% of our HOA condo clients were created prior to January 1, 2024. But just keep in mind, in case you hear the term company applicant, that's what it refers to. In terms of information for the association, which is the reporting company, you need the full name of the association, any alternate or trade name, the street address of the principal place of business, and the taxpayer identification number for the association. That is actually all the information that you need for the reporting company for the association. For the beneficial owners, you'll need the name of each board member, their date of birth, residential address, and an identifying number issued by the government, which can include a passport, driver's license, or state ID, and a copy of that ID with a photograph. So for most people, most board members, all the information that's going to be required to file is located on the driver's license, along with a copy of the driver's license. Additionally, and again, we'll walk through this when we go through the steps, the report needs to be certified by the actual individual who is filling out and completing the filing for the association. So that person, it really can be anyone who is authorized by the board to file the report on behalf of the association. You'll need the full name of the filer and their email or phone number. That's it. They don't have to have a copy of their license uploaded. A lot of our clients have asked if one of the board members can file the report or whether they need an attorney or accountant to file the report. There's no requirement that an attorney or accountant be used to file a report. And actually, FinCEN guidance specifically addresses this and says that the agency anticipates that most reporting companies will not need assistance in filing the report. It is more complicated for corporations that are actually doing business in interstate commerce. There are elections to, decipher, but for an association, there really isn't a lot for of legal work to look into, either filing or you're not going to file. And right now, as Matt said, given the ambiguity of the language, we're recommending that for now, associations, even unincorporated associations and trusts, do file. But Matt and I talked about this morning. We still agree with FinCEN and believe associations can file this report on their own. And if you'd like our assistance, we're more than happy to help. There's no filing fee from FinCEN, so there's no charge to file the report, and there's no requirement that the filing be made annually. The trigger for a new filing is when there's a change to the beneficial ownership. So if there are 3 board members and the same individuals are reelected or appointed, there's no change and there's no need to file a new report. If a board member is elected or maybe someone resigns, then an update to the previous report must be made, and that update is supposed to be within 30 days of the change. If a previous report has incorrect information, let's say someone's name is misspelled, the association needs to file what they refer to as a corrected report. So an updated report would be a change in the beneficial ownership, and a corrected report is to correct an error. That also needs to be filed within 30 days of when the reporting company is aware that there's a mistake that was made. Interestingly, kind of cumbersome, whether the association is filing an updated report or a corrected report, the same information that was required for the initial report is required to put in again. So that means that the information for the reporting company and each beneficial owner will need to be filed and submitted again. Unfortunately, you can't just provide the new information like through an amendment. You actually have to file a whole new complete report. In planning this then, so having copies of board members' licenses in a secure file could save some time, as that information will be on hand, in the event that the association has to file again. But obviously, having personal information stored is somewhat of a risk. We've all heard about hacks over the years where people's personal information has been taken. So, if your association is going to use a third party, whether it's a reporting company or accountant, a lawyer, to store the information, you want to ask what the security is like, who has access to it, just some basic questions to figure out. Make sure that it's secure. Another way to potentially make filing easier and limit the need to store the personal information with third parties is to obtain a FinCEN ID number. So each board member can actually make their own filing to FinCEN and obtain an ID number. And instead of having to input like their name, the date of birth, upload the copy of their license again, they can just insert or the individual ID number can be used instead. So once someone has a FinCEN ID number, you don't need to upload a copy of their license or photo ID again, because FinCEN will already have it. There are exemptions built into the regulations. Charitable organizations, for instance, are exempt. Also, there's an exemption for reporting companies that have more than 20 employees and have a gross revenue of more than 5 million. There aren't that many associations. We had one so far. One of our clients actually met that. They had their own employees on site and spoke to various accountants who agreed that when they talk about revenue, that condo fee income was counted. So that client was exempt. But for the vast majority of associations, there's not going to be an exemption. Although Matt has a little bit later has some updates regarding, some challenges that are being made, and also that update on the lawsuit that MEEB filed in federal court pro bono. So we'll hear that in a few minutes. All right, let's see if we can walk through. I'm going to
Yeah,
try to
you want.
share my screen.
Yep. All right, go ahead, Mark.
So on our website, this is the home page. And if your association is looking to file the actual report, you're going to click right here. And it's going to bring you to this screen. And you'll see there's a number of tabs across here. We'll go through each one of them. Already checked for you is the initial report. If you were doing something else, you can move that and the fields change. But for now, initial report, we'll check that. We'll start here, initial report, and then you can go to next. Since this is the first time, we're going to check this box, request to receive a FinCEN ID number with the filing. And here's where you're putting in the reporting company information, the association's name. So I'm just going to use White Acre Condominium. No trade name. We're going to select the tax ID number. And these are a fake number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. United States is the jurisdiction. And we'll just use the physical address. Let's say it's one Main Street. Braintree, using our office location, Massachusetts. So you select the state here and the zip code. So that's it. That's all the information you're going to need for the reporting company for the association. So full name.
Mark, just
tax.
on the address there, I think you may mention this, but it's the address of the condominium. So if you're happen to be a property manager, filling that in, do not put, care of ABC Management Company with your address. You put the actual address of the condominium. And I know that a lot of condominiums, that they may have multiple addresses. It could be, 20-25 Washington Street or something like that. Just put that in exactly like that. So just make sure you put in the actual condominium address, not the address of your manager or somebody else.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. It says the principal business, the address of the principal business, which, for an association doesn't really fit all that well. But I think the physical address makes sense. If they want to contact someone, they're going to contact the filer. And we'll get to that in a second. So everything is complete here. We're going to hit the next button, and this will bring you to whether it's an existing condominium or a new association. So it's already checked. This is what I was mentioning earlier. It's already checked to be an existing association. So these fields, let's see. So we uncheck it or we check it. So it's created prior to, and we should be able to move forward without the fields. If it was a new association, you simply click that, and then you put the company applicant information in. At the top here, you select the number of board members that you have. So if it's a 5-person board, 5. If it's 3, here we're just going to do 1. And we put there, we use John Smith. I'll keep this simple, 1980. We'll use 20 Main Street.
In the address that the individual fills in is their primary address. So obviously for most board members, it probably is their address at the condominium, but if it happened to be somebody who did not live at the condominium, but on the board, they lived elsewhere, they're an investor, whatever it might be, it would be whatever that person's primary address is, which again, is likely on your driver's license.
Right, exactly.
I think you gotta check the state issued above their mark for the driver's license.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I thought it was actually this physical state.
No, it's all right. I appreciate it.
So this is just your driver's license number that Mark's putting in.
Yeah. United States, Massachusetts. And here's where you would upload. And of course, my upload's not here. I'm going to use a picture. But that would normally where you'd be uploading your license. So again, this is for the board member information. We're assuming that you're just getting the information right off the license. And I uploaded a picture, but you'd be uploading an actual photocopy of the license. So I'm going to hit next, come back up, and this is where the person who's actually doing the filing, which in this case is myself. I'll put in my address. It's a little tedious, obviously, but in terms of difficulty, it's very easy. So file information, my name, and my email address, and I'm going to actually submit it. And before I do, I want to say that earlier we actually disconnected from FinCEN, and this is going into a test ground. So because of that, I'm hoping this goes through. It should, but it might take some time. Let's see. If not, I'm going to blame Matt because it was his idea to actually do it.
And to Mark's point, by the way, I would say if anyone is contemplating filing as soon as this ends, just wait a little bit so we can get it reconnected to FinCEN. We just took down the connection for this webinar so Mark could do this demonstration, but so just don't rush to file it right after our presentation ends.
Yeah, we'll turn it back on
Yeah.
shortly.
Yeah, doesn't
But
take
again,
long.
we started developing this portal because there was a lot of apprehension and it seemed like a lot of fear of boards about how to do it, and I think it sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. So we're not charging. We developed a portal. Anyone is free to use it. We don't store the information, so any information that's in there that you enter, like your driver's license copy, that doesn't go to MEEB. It goes directly to FinCEN. We'll get a confirmation, which will contain the email address of someone who filed and the tax ID number of the association, but that's actually public record. So I'm hoping this goes through. And hopefully we're not sitting here for another 25 minutes.
Do you want me to continue? I can sort of continue without the slides actually up if you want.
Yeah, it was it's been fairly quick, so give it 25 more seconds.
Alright.
Um,
Let's just go see if there's any
I'm hoping that it does go through, but in the event it doesn't, I'll tell you what happens. Usually you'll get a success filing notice will pop up. And then below that it'll say download the report transcript. And you
yeah,
click on
there's a couple of, while we're waiting to see, I'll take a couple of questions from here that actually deal specifically with this. One of the questions is, does the license photo have to be front and back or just the front? You know, I think I think it's just the
it's
front,
just the
right?
front. Yeah, just the
Okay.
front.
Um, someone asked me, we could do it again, but it says, can you click on the multiple trustees to show that screen? Do you know, obviously we can't probably hit the back button at the moment, but
Yeah, I can't go
click
back
on two
now.
trustees. I assume there'd just be multiple boxes to fill out, one for each trustee, correct?
Yeah, if you had two trustees, you'd select two trustees. I selected one
Okay,
because I only filled out one. But if there were five, you would do the same, and you just repeat the same process that I did
yep,
for each of them. So it'd be a name, date of birth, license, upload.
yep. What if someone says, what if a board member lives in a state that's not listed in the option? So when you were going through that and you're typing in, you know, the address of the board members, did it only pop up with Massachusetts?
We designed it so that it was the states that we practice in.
Well, but I
Um,
think that person's question is, I could be on my condo board in Massachusetts, but maybe I live in Florida.
yeah, we can manually change that. Those are just drop downs.
Okay, got it. Let me see here. Someone
Great
said
to go.
when I tried to do this last week, the site was not accepting my ID, even though it was not a large file. Has this been corrected? Are you aware of?
Not aware of that. There was a time when we were disconnecting to do this and preparing for this. So it shouldn't, we've done a number of filings and it's been fine. Um,
Yep. This is a good question here. It says, again, this goes to the address for the association. It says, by address, do you mean the physical address of the building or the mailing address? So I suppose that the association could have a PO box.
they can't use a PO box, so you got to use
Okay.
a physical address.
Okay.
And if there are multiple addresses, I would try to use the best one. I think in terms of notice, the filer has their email and possibly a phone number for contact wise. So I think, as you said, as they go through layers, they want to know actually where this property is located.
Yep. Got it.
Well, and not I don't want to keep cycling through here.
Yeah, I suspect it's just because we kind of
Yeah.
disconnected it at this point. So why don't we, do you want me to continue back with the PowerPoint for now?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, obviously we can walk anyone through this as well.
Yeah, just leave it. I mean, leave it up. If it happens to come up while we're talking, you can just reshare your screen. So why don't you stop
Okay.
sharing? Perfect. I will pull up the PowerPoint. We'll resume that. All right. So we did the example. Okay. So the developments that are kind of happening. So I mentioned that, there's some, right now it is the, the requirement as we believe, but there's been some attempts, both locally and nationally, to either get exemptions or to extend the timeline. Kind of on this, I'll talk about the second bullet first here. So as it says, this is obviously a federal act. So there has been some legislation filed in Congress, I believe in both the House and the Senate, that seeks to postpone the initial filing. So right now, as Mark mentioned, you have to file your first report by January 1, 2025. So there is legislation pending in Congress that would push that out, to give people more time to kind of wrap their heads around it and figure it out. And there's also legislation specifically to exempt condominiums entirely. That would be fantastic, obviously, if it passed. I will acknowledge that I'm not overly optimistic. We are in the full swing, as everyone knows, of election season right now. So your congressional, senators and congressmen and representatives are all out in their districts campaigning. There's not much happening down in DC right now. So I wouldn't hold my breath that we're going to see any legislation passed. Not to mention, it's not exactly a priority for Congress to be, passing legislation to specifically exempt condominium associations from the Corporate Transparency Act. I think they, at least in their minds, they have far better things on their bigger things on their plate. I think this is important, but that's just me. In addition to the legislation, there are multiple lawsuits out there. There was a suit, maybe you heard about, down in Alabama, that was filed by a sort of a federation of small businesses. And they actually prevailed, and they got a court to determine that it was unconstitutional. But the ruling is very specific and narrowly tailored to the members of that association, where they have a stay from filing because the lawsuit really only pertained to them. I will tell you that the government, the United States Treasury, has appealed that, so it's going to move its way up through the appeals court, and who knows what could happen there. CAI, Community Associations Institute, I'm sure you're familiar with them. They just filed, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, a lawsuit down in Virginia to try to get some exemptions or declare that it's not specific to condominiums. And then locally, here in Massachusetts, our office, as Mark said a few minutes ago, pro bono, did file a complaint in federal court against the Department of Treasury on behalf of one of our condominium association clients. It's basically seeking a declaration that it doesn't apply. And we use the logic that I mentioned before, that a quote or similar office is not a registry of deeds. Condominium trusts and unincorporated associations do not file with the Secretary of State, and therefore there's no reason that the CTA should apply, which has kind of been a little bit of our thinking. But as I'll mention at the end, the risk of just taking that position and some of the penalties are pretty severe. So we've been, telling clients, as most other firms, hey, listen, you may want to file just because probably don't want to go to jail or have some severe fines. But again, we filed this lawsuit to try to get the government to, agree, or even better, a judge to agree that this doesn't apply. There is a little bit of a development on that. We filed the lawsuit, I think, was that the end of July, Mark, or beginning of August, we filed the suit.
In July, yeah.
Yeah. And under the rules of procedure, I think the government had something like 60 days to file an answer. So that clock was just about to run out. We did reach out to the Department of Justice, the local, United States Attorney's Office here. We actually spoke with them at the end of last week. And they indicated, that they're thinking that maybe this doesn't apply, and they're going to probably get back to us pretty soon. So, there may be some good news, but don't, cash that check quite yet, and we'll see what happens. But I suspect that we'll have an update in the next, week, maybe 2 weeks. It's the government, so they don't always move that quickly. So
I'm usually a pessimist, as you
yeah,
know. But I'm optimistic about this. There was a good conversation,
yeah,
and
yeah,
hopefully we do have developments that at least will give a
yeah. So
boost to associations and trusts. One thing, just quick, Matt, if an exemption does happen, whether it's by court or through Congress, and you've already filed, there's actually, on our website and on the FinCEN website, you would the report you want to file is the newly exempt entity report. You're basically saying, yes, we filed, we're now exempt. We're filing a report saying we're not gonna file again further. So just wanted to mention that.
yeah. So stay tuned. If my guess is most of you are already on our email newsletter. That's how you found out about this webinar. And so as soon as we get any updates, we'll certainly be sending out an email newsletter blast. But for some reason you're not on our newsletter, please go to our website and sign up so you can get any updates on this or any other important topics.
Stay tuned. It's exciting. It's about as
Yes.
exciting as condo law gets sometimes.
Yeah. So, Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about, okay, well, we do have to file, but maybe we've got some board members that aren't complying and won't do it. What do we do there?
Yeah, that seems to be kind of the concern is, board members don't want to share their personal information, or some don't. And the concern is, okay, if it's a board of five and four members say, okay, here's my license, let's file the report. And the fifth one says, I don't want to share my information. What's the remedy? And there are a couple. I mean, ultimately, by being on the board member has to comply with the law, and the law says if you are a beneficial owner, you can't withhold information to prevent the file. So, but that's extreme. We wouldn't really want to seek, go seek a court order to do that. So some associations, and we've talked to some about the future, an amendment, possibly amending the documents. And of course, we're not jumping to do this right now in Massachusetts because there's a good chance, I think, at this point that the unincorporated association trust may be exempt. We'll see. But in the future, if this continues, one way to handle it is to amend the documents and provide that if you're going to serve on the board, that you have to. I think you skipped this. What you went back once on the slides there,
Oh,
Matt.
sorry. Yep.
You have to provide the information such as your license, your date of birth. So in a photocopy. Otherwise, you're not going to be eligible. Um, that's going to require owner consent because you're amending the documents, and which might be difficult to do. Probably not an immediate fix. If you're looking for something, kind of quicker to get everyone on the same page, some associations are talking about adopting just a resolution among the board members currently saying, okay, we haven't filed yet, but it's due by January 1, 2025. And we're in mid-September. To the extent we're going to file, say, mid-October or end of October, then we're all agreeing right now that we'll provide our information. Whether that's really binding or not, or how far you go to push that, obviously there's questions there. But at least you have something where you can point to say we had the discussion, we all knew the rules, we all agreed to it. Here's your signature, and it at least brings up the topic to be discussed. And that brings up another point is that, going forward, if this is a requirement going forward, even just making owners aware of it. I know board members have been hearing a lot about it. My guess is that the individual unit owner level may have heard about it, but probably not paying much attention to it. So, circulating maybe in the newsletter or in the meeting minutes, just about the requirement and that it's going to be part, or at least right now it's going to be part of the duties of a board member to, provide this information. Um, it could be useful. The more information out there, the less of a shock. I personally don't think the information requested is all that, sensitive, although it is a driver's license. But I understand why people don't want to share. I really don't like to share if I don't have to, social security numbers or if we hear about these hacks. But ultimately, like I said, there's workarounds for that. If people are really concerned, they can file directly with FinCEN and get the ID number. And unfortunately, if this remains a requirement, the associations are going to have to comply, and that's really the bottom line. Um, Practically speaking, and Matt, jump in if you want, but I was, as we're thinking about the future, annual meetings, elections, typically at most associations following election, there's a board certificate of some sort that's filed with the registry of deeds saying, okay, this is what happened. The meeting was, X date. Here's the people that were appointed or elected. They're accepting their appointments, and here are all the board members. And we typically do that at the annual meeting or just following the annual meeting. So some ideas, you can file this report at the annual meeting. Someone has a laptop, you can go onto our website, you can go on to FinCEN, you can file right there while people are there, and it probably takes 10 or 15 minutes to do, but it's doable. And I think it's gonna become part of the process, really.
Yeah, it would make absolute sense to do it at the same time, right after election, when you do your your new election certificates. The best time. You're going to have everybody there anyways. They're probably signing, they need to have it signed in front of a notary who may need to look at the license.
Right.
So definitely the best time to get it.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern that I've heard from clients is they really don't mind providing the information, but they're concerned where it's going to be stored. Um, and obviously concerned about hackers getting a hold of it.
And then I think just one more slide before we get to our questions here, and there's quite a few I see in the Q&A. What are the
Yeah,
penalties?
yeah,
So the penalties, if you don't comply, are a 591-day civil penalty, as well as possibly a $10,000 fine and 2 years in prison for a criminal penalty. So as you can see, the penalties are pretty stiff, which is why, again, that there's a good argument that maybe it doesn't apply to condominiums and HOAs in Mass, but yeah, I don't want to be the one that tells my client no, and then they end up in jail or facing some hefty
right,
fines. So
right. And that's why we haven't come out and definitively said, hey, you're an unincorporated association, you're a trust. Don't worry about it. Don't file. We've been in contact with FinCEN directly, trying to get clarification, and that went through the other avenues, but we haven't. So right now, we do think you need to file. Just remember, though, also, it is scary when you look at 2 years in prison and $591 a day. But the guidelines state that it's unlawful to willfully provide false or fraudulent information or to willfully fail to report um, the beneficial ownership information. And in the guidance, FinCEN also states that, they're aware, they actually say this, they're aware that these are new regulations and that they themselves are taking a lot of steps to try to educate reporting companies. And they also say that they understand that a lot of the information that's required to be filed has to come from individuals, and that some people will hold out giving that information. So it's probably dangerous to read too much into that guidance in terms of compliance, but the indicators seem to be, at least our interpretation is that FinCEN isn't prepping hundreds of staff to start prosecuting cases against associations for violations. So we don't think that associations should ignore the requirements, and and should file. But given the amount of filings and the current challenges that Matt mentioned, in our opinion, the risk of being prosecuted for good faith mistakes, you know, uh, misspellings or things that are or errors, or even if one board member refuses to give information, we think you should file it anyway. We think that's probably pretty low for good faith mistakes. I mean, um, but you need to comply, and there are penalties, so we got to bear that in mind too.
yep. All right, let's jump to some of the questions here in the Q&A. One person just asked if these PowerPoint can be made available. Yes, I think it's usually on our website. If not, just email one of us and we can certainly get that to you. We just talked about that. What can happen if a board member or trustee refuses to file? Again, we just went over the penalties, and Mark talked about sort of some of the ways to hopefully get them to file, the persuasion tactics. Next questions. I heard a lot about Massachusetts. We're in New Hampshire. Is it the same concerns? Yes, I don't practice in New Hampshire. Mark, do you know, I mean, are condominiums there filed with the
Yeah,
Secretary of State's office, or?
I think it's a mixture. I don't practice there either.
Okay.
But this, it's right now the wide cast net is basically making that all associations have to file at this point.
Yep. So yeah, so obviously we've been talking Massachusetts a lot because that's where we filed the lawsuit, but the law does apply to all 50 states. Does condo beneficial owners have to be all board members, or is it acceptable for just one board member to report? In our case, there is no 25% owner. Yes, so if you have a 3-member board, 5-member board, 7-member board, whatever it is, all board members, not just one, not just the president, but all board members do need to file their information.
And that's because it's not those are different requirements. So if someone owns more than 25%, they are a beneficial owner, whether they're on the board or not. Um, and a board member has to file, even though they might own one unit, because they're actually the voting, individual who's has substantial control over the association.
Someone asked, will you be showing how beneficial owners can obtain a FinCEN ID number? I think that was on the website. Is that?
Yeah, they have to go through FinCEN to do that, but it's actually the same process you would go through when you're filling out the beneficial ownership information.
Okay. If the condo doesn't have an office, just multiple streets. So there's a lot of questions in the chat kind of about the address issue. and I get it that it's confusing because most condominiums don't have, you know, an address, right? There's no place where the condo receives mail, particularly for a larger one that's maybe managed by a property management company. And there's not like a specific location. Again, I would suggest that you just put down an address. I mean, you know, for a lot of condominiums, everyone's got the same address, right? It could be 100 Washington Street, Unit 1, 100 Washington Street, Unit 2, et cetera, et cetera. In which case there, just put 100 Washington Street, you know, Braintree, Mass. You don't have to put a unit number or anything. If it's more of a scenario where, you know, maybe you have multiple buildings and one building is, you know, 100 Washington, the next building's 102, the next building's 104, et cetera. You know, I think you could do, I guess I would say this, there's no wrong answer here. You're not going to get penalized or go to jail for giving it, you know, wrong answer because you didn't willfully do it. You know, you could put down, I suppose, 100-108 Washington Street. You could also just pick one of the buildings. If one of the board members wanted to use their address, they could do that. There's no right or wrong answer to how you provide that address.
And just jumping in, Matt, I know there's a question about the name of the association. You should use the name that's either in the bylaws or the Declaration of Trust. So ABC Condominium Trust would be the full name of a condominium that's formed as a trust.
Yep. If the condo association utilizes a property management company, can the property manager make the filing on behalf? Yes, the management company could do the filing on their behalf.
Right. It could be anyone that is authorized. So it could be a property manager. It could be a member of the board. It could even be a third party. Um, any individual really that the board authorizes to make the filing.
Yep. If you're reporting for a road association, so this is more of like a homeowners association, frankly, than a condo, what physical address is used? For example, we have a PO box for mailing, which obviously is not the physical address. There is no single physical address for the association. Again, I think you just pick one. You know,
Yeah, or a range of address. You know,
yeah,
you can have more than one street address.
Yep. Another question about the address, I think we just covered. Again, a lot of questions about the address here. If a driver's license, does it have to be the front or back? It is the front of the driver's license only.
Right. The main piece of information they're getting off that is the state identifying number and the photo of the person.
Right. If individual board members can get a FinCEN ID, would it not be better to get them to get an ID and we file for the association? I don't see any downside and we don't have to have copies of a driver's license on file. Well, you still have to submit the driver's license.
Well, they would get that. They submit the driver's license to get the FinCEN ID number.
Yeah.
Once that's on record, that individual doesn't have to then resubmit their driver's license. It's already at FinCEN. They have an ID number. So yeah, I mean that to me is a pretty efficient way of doing it.
Okay. We are self-managed with a 5-member board. Could each board member use our office address as opposed to our residential? So
No.
if you're talking about for the association, the reporting company, then yes, you would use the condominium's, I suppose, office address. But if you're talking about each board member reporting their own personal information, no, they have to use their personal primary address. If a condominium is a trust, it has a declaration of trust, now articles of incorporation, does that condo still need to file? That's the $1 million question here that, you know.
Hoping to have an answer in
Yeah.
less than maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're hoping that our lawsuit answers that and answers it in the negative, but that is the $1 million question. Are nonprofit 501c3s an exempt nonprofit? I believe so. It's not my area. You might want to check with your CPA, but yeah, I believe so on that one. Do you know, Mark, for more?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Charitable organizations are exempt, but just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you're a charitable organization. So,
Yep. Can you file directly with FinCEN? Yes, you can do it right on their website. You don't have to go through our portal or anywhere. You can go directly to FinCEN's website. If the 25% owner is an LLC or corporation, or if the board member owns the unit as an entity and not under personal name, how is the filing done for the name? So it's sort of a two-part question. If there is if there's an entity, an LLC or a corporation that happens to own more than 25% of the units in the condominium, then yes, that, entity needs to do a filing. And then separately, if there is a board member, it doesn't really matter how the board member owns their unit. It matters how their name is listed on the board. So if they're listed as Mark Einhorn as the board member, then they're filing for Mark Einhorn. There can be situations, and usually it's more developers, where the condo board member or the HOA board member is actually an entity. It could be, the board member could be an LLC, in which case, again, that LLC would have to do the filing, but that's a very small percentage of board members.
But I received one question more than once over the last past week, and that was, our property managers considered beneficial owners? And in certain circumstances, that's possible, but in the vast majority, no. And the reason is that the manager, like like an attorney, like an accountant, is not exercising substantial control over the entity. They're not making the voting decisions. They are basically being told directionally what to do by the board and then carrying that out. So no, in the vast majority of cases, no.
Yep. Uh, does the submission go through your office? Is that what you are showing us now? So not really, we're not housing the data. We're really just as Mark described it, a portal where you go to our website, you submit that, and then boom, it just goes right into the FinCEN. We've linked it directly to them. So it's not like you're putting it there and then our staff is then retyping it into FinCEN. You're submitting it directly. It just happens to go through our portal. For board member files the report, there's no need for the property manager to be identified, correct? Correct. If you guys file it directly, you don't need the manager to be identified. Two sort of similar questions. When does this have to be done? What is the deadline for filing? For a condominium or HOA or any entity that existed prior to January 1 of this year, you have to file your first report by January 1, 2025. That is the magic date, January 1, 2025. My daughter has multiple LLCs. Does she have to file for each one? Yes, unless they meet some exemption, but yes, if they do, file for everyone. Does the first filer receive the ID number to give to the others to file? Do you know the answer?
So, yeah, I think this confusion. The report has to be done at the same time. So if there are five board members, you would be filling in five separate information for each of those individuals. It's not something where two board members can file and then, the three others can do at a later date. So if one person should be doing it, easiest way is probably having copies of the license, photocopy or a picture, and then doing the filing, having one person file as and certifying that it's filed. And once it is filed, you'll receive a report back saying, successful, and it'll list, the owners that are registered.
Yep. All right, answer that. The due date is January 1, 2025, but do we wait until our new 2025 board is installed? No. So that's, if you waited until the 2025 board installed, which is presumably would be sometime after January 1, then you wouldn't be in compliance because you missed the deadline to file, which is 1/1/2025. So you need to file before 1/1/2025. What if a board member refuses to provide the information? Mark touched upon that. You have some remedies, you might want to consider adopting a sort of a rule or regulation. You could try to fine that board member for non-compliance because they're not complying with a law or regulation. If one files directly, can it be done only online or is paper filings permitted?
There's two options. One's a PDF that you fill out and can submit, and then one's electronic.
And
I
yes,
think yeah, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say the electronic is just as easy, probably the easiest way to do it, and you're giving the same information anyway.
Yeah, and then someone asked if you do it directly on FinCEN's website opposed to ours, does it look similar? I assume yes.
It does look similar, except if you go to the FinCEN site, they use the acronym or the correct terms like reporting company, beneficial owner. We've changed that to try to make it user friendly because we're just essentially dealing with associations, so board member associations, and
Yep.
tried to make it just simpler language, but the information that you need will be the same, and the
Okay.
fields are essentially the same as well.
Question was, good question. Next question, given the lawsuit looking for clarity, when do you recommend filing? I would say definitely not right away, because as we keep saying, we might have some clarity as soon as the next, week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So definitely not right away. You have until the end of the year, so you can wait up until then. I mean, for example, I'm going to, I know one of my clients has their annual meeting coming up, I think, in the middle or end of October. There's going to be an election then. So there's probably going to be new board members. So I wouldn't tell them to file now, just because then they need to have to file again, after
Right.
that. So if you have a meeting this fall, definitely wait until after that. I wouldn't wait until, the very last day. Obviously with the holidays too, people get busy, it might be harder to get their info. You could certainly start gathering the info, ask all the board members, hey, get us a copy of your license, so we can get this ready, and then just kind of hold on to them and wait and to see what happens with the lawsuit or anything else, before you file.
Yeah, and you can gather the information. I mean, again, you want to store it properly, but it's really copies of people's licenses. That's the information that you're going to need. One question, real quick, Matt, that also came up was, what happens if someone's license expires that had filed? Um, as long as they renew it, as long as the number doesn't change, and it doesn't change when you renew your license, you wouldn't have to amend that. My understanding is if you used a passport to file and your passport expired and you got a new passport, that passport number does change, and then you would need to amend that.
Got it. Um, this is an interesting one. For the association, the question was about, we've been talking about associations created prior to January 1, 2024, and they have to file by January in 2025. This person said their trust document is dated August 2023, but was recorded in January 2024. What is the date of creation? Wow.
Yeah, that's what I think. I want to skip that one.
Yeah, I think maybe reach out to us and we can talk to you
Yeah.
offline with that. It's kind of an
I
interesting
mean,
scenario.
to be honest with you, if your trust document was signed on August 2023, that's when, in my view,
Created.
the entity was created.
Yeah. Next question is, does the proposed legislation cover HOAs as well? So if you're asking about the congressional legislation that's pending, I believe it does. If you're asking about our lawsuit, we filed it on behalf of a condo association, but I would hope that any decision or stipulation by the government would say that, listen, any entity similarly related that was not created with the Secretary of State, but only at the registry would be similarly situated. So yes, if your HOA is unincorporated and only filed at the registry of deeds and not filed with the Secretary of State, then I think you would be likely covered under our lawsuit.
Yeah, we tried to keep it as narrow as possible so that we could try to get a quick answer. And hopefully, again, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I may have missed this, but is an HOA by definition a corporation? If not, what makes filing required? No, an HOA is not by definition a corporation. Something's only a corporation is if it has the word Inc. after it, for example. The Whispering Pines Condominium, Association Incorporated. That would be a corporation. Most condominiums, or your question, HOA, the Washington Street Homeowners Association is not a corporation. The Washington Street Homeowners Association Inc. is a corporation. So again, you're definitely obligated to file if you are an actual incorporated association. If you're not, stay tuned and we'll hopefully have an answer for you on it soon. Is anyone at MEEB filing in New Hampshire as well to see if this applies? I assume they mean filing a lawsuit. I think we have not. Perhaps depending on how our lawsuit gets decided, it may have some applicability to New Hampshire. So we'll certainly, be letting everybody know that. And same with Rhode Island, where we have associations as well. You mentioned that charitable entities are exempt. Does that apply to nonprofit corporations in New Hampshire? That's too specific of a question or too general of a question. Really is going to depend on exactly the type of nonprofit. So the exemptions in the Corporate Transparency Act references certain, internal revenue code. So it really depends on how you file.
Yeah, most of the time, I mean, unless it's an HOA or condominium is not going to be not a charitable organization. It may be a nonprofit, and right now they'd have to file.
Yep. Next question is a good one. I have a property that there's an entity who owns more than 25%, I'm assuming, of the units. Do we need to file all partners of that entity or only one partner of that entity? So you'd have to file for everybody. So for that LLC that perhaps owns more than 25% of your units, you need to file for all the members or managers of that LLC. You need to file all the information for them.
How are we doing on time? I do want to respect, we're
It's
right up
12.
against the time.
Yeah, we're at an
Um,
hour. I'm trying to skip over the ones that we've answered.
You
There's a
know,
question here about Vermont. I don't practice there, so I'm gonna skip that. Um, if a board member is not an owner, do they still need to file? Yes, because the board member still exerts control over the association. Um,
but we can also, if we don't get to the question, feel free to email us or call us. Um,
here's a good one too. Annual reporting is it an annual reporting requirement or only when there is a change? It's only when there's a change. You don't have to, if you have no change on your board from one year to the next, you don't have to file. But if there's any change, even if somebody leaves and you don't fill that vacancy, then you have to file. Obviously, if there is a new person on file as well. Let's see here. We already answered a lot of these. Can each person have the notary certify individually, or is it better to have as a group and have a notary present? Well, that's the notary only applies to the certificate of election that you record. That's kind of unrelated to
yeah,
this
there's no, just to be
issue.
clear, there's no notary that's required for the CTA filing. As Matt said, that we were mentioning that because typically what happens after an election is the board would file a certificate of election, and those board members would sign that, and that is notarized. But to do that, you usually show your license, or you should show your license. But for the CTA filing, there's no notary that's required.
Um, can a board member be asked to resign if they're refusing to comply? You can ask them. They may not, and then you could try to, remove them or something like that. Is this presentation recording going to be made available? Yes, it'll be on our website. I think usually within a couple of days, the recording is on our website.
Yeah.
Does an on-site property manager who works for a self-managed association have to file? I would think not. Again, it's really just the board members because that individual is just taking direction from the board. Do we want to wrap it up here, Mark? It's
Yeah, I
still,
think so. Just to be
yeah.
respectful for everybody who's on the call.
What'd you say?
Just to be respectful, I think we should wrap it
Yeah.
up for everyone.
All right. There's still a lot of questions. I apologize. We didn't get to any of them. A lot of these, I think maybe we did. So if you have, any other questions, particularly specific ones about your association, obviously feel free to reach out to Mark or myself or whoever your attorney here is at MEEB, and we're always happy to help out and answer however we can.
Yeah, and we'll look for our newsletter. We'll be having updates. Again, we're anticipating some updates in the next week or two. And any developments we'll be sending out to all of you.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Thanks for
All right.
joining, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.